Okay, so all that we've got left for week 3 is minerals and water. So here are our 2 objectives for minerals. A lot of this should be review that we talked about in 220, but not all of it. So we're going to dive into this just a little bit. Okay, so minerals are inorganic substances that we need for our cells to function properly. Okay, and they can be by themselves, or they can form compounds, or they can be with organic compounds. Now, if we can break them up into specific ions, we're going to call them electrolytes. Okay, so here are the 6 minerals that we're going to go through. And so these are the ones that are in your book. So we've got calcium, phosphorus, iron, sodium, potassium, and chloride. All right, so we're going to just start off with calcium. So when you think of calcium, more often than not, I'm assuming you think of bone. And with bone is teeth. Okay, calcium is also important for cross-bridge cycling, right? We need calcium to bind to troponin so tropomyosin gets out of the way. It's also the signal for exocytosis so that neurotransmitter will be released by a neuron. Okay, if you don't have a lot of calcium, especially since it's related closely to bone and teeth formation, this can lead to osteoporosis. However, generally speaking, we don't need, or people don't need supplementation for calcium. Okay, next we've got phosphorus. Okay, remember our cell membranes are made up of a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, and so if my cell membranes made up of phosphorus, we need phosphorus. Okay, it also is similar to calcium in that it helps make up bone and teeth. Generally, if something affects calcium, it affects phosphorus as well. When you think of phosphorus, think phosphate, think ATP. And so if we don't have phosphorus or phosphate, we're not going to have ATP, which will make it very hard to do something since we use ATP for energy. All right, and like I said, it's linked with calcium, and just like calcium, generally don't need to supplement. Then there's iron. Okay, so iron helps with oxygen transport, specifically with myoglobin and hemoglobin. All right, if we have low iron, which is common in women due to menstrual cycle, that can reduce endurance performance. If you don't have as many red blood cells as you could, you've got a lower oxygen carrying capacity, which means you're not going to be able to do whatever it is you need to do or want to do for as long. Okay, and because of the menstrual cycle, women are more likely to be deficient. And then we're going to end by just lumping these 3 together. Okay, so sodium, chloride, and potassium. Now these together create what's called an osmotic gradient. And remember, with osmosis, water is moving because ions can't, because we've got some membrane that's not permeable to ions or to specific ions. So as a result, water moves to try and balance out the gradient. All right, so one of the first things that we talked about in 220 is with membrane potential. And I'm assuming one of the first things you talked about in your nervous system physiology class, whether it was with me or somebody else, would be membrane potential. It also plays with water balance, or affects water balance, because wherever there is salt, water follows. Water follows the salt. It also plays an important role with cardiac function. We've got sodium and potassium especially going in or out, which will cause the different phases of an action potential. And in these cases, you're unlikely to be deficient, right? Sodium is in everything. We, in America especially, have a very high sodium diet. One of the great things about sodium is it helps things taste better. It's a preservative. As long as we balance our sodium and our potassium intake, that helps to limit hypertension. But what's really interesting is that hypertension and sodium-specific hypertension, sodium-related hypertension, it doesn't affect all people the same. There is a higher incidence of sodium-related hypertension in Black populations. Okay, sodium can affect blood pressure, which can affect hypertension. So blood pressure and hypertension are the same thing. Ultimately, this could cause heart disease. Okay, but you also have to remember that this is tied to your kidneys. If your kidneys are good at clearing out your sodium, then you're probably going to be less likely to be at risk for sodium-related hypertension. All right, and with that, we're going to end on the minerals.